Hi, my name is Mahir Suri, and welcome to our first installment of Project Legacy. Today I spoke to Marion Coti. Coti was a Jewish refugee who escaped Chemnitz, Germany following the rise of the Third Reich. The majority of our conversation centered around her seemingly normal childhood that was abruptly interrupted by the rise of the Hitler regime, her journey from Europe to Asia, passing through nations such as Russia and Japan, and eventually living out the remainder of her adolescence in China, and finally, her conception of home. Unfortunately, Coti was unwilling to be videotaped, however, we've included the audio recordings from our conversation. The following is her story. Please enjoy.
I did not have my marriage certificate. I got married in 1960. I just had a receipt. While they were going digital, they needed the marriage certificate. My naturalization papers are all under my maiden name. I never changed it to my married name. And they said I have to get the original. Well, City Hall in New York, 1960. Anyway, to make a long story short, Adam did eventually go into the city, was still able, before they computerized everything, was still able to get the certificate, the marriage certificate. But on one of the visits, on the second visit, on my way to work with him, he was taking me to work. I got so frustrated because they wouldn't renew this damn license. And I said, you know, Adam, I could almost cry. And he looked down at me and he said, Mom, you lived under the Nazis, you lived under the Japanese, you're going to cry about a friggin' license.
But just in terms of your early life, what was your life like before the rise of the Third Reich?
I was a normal child and went to school. I guess I don't know if it was called first grade or kindergarten, with the German school. Got into German school. Now this is 1937, but already, while Hitler was in power, obviously already. But in my town, there was a whole big Jewish community. They were within, you never socialized. Jews did not socialize with non-Jews. This was, and you have to understand that in Germany, and this is very, very few Americans can understand this, you were never really German, you were always a Jew.
Interesting.
That's the whole part of all of this, is that you were a Jew. So even though I was born in Germany, as far as the Americans were concerned, I was German, because the Americans, it's where you are born.
Right, it's nationalism instead of religion.
Right. In the rest of Europe is what passport do you have?
Right.
And that's the country you have a Colombian passport, so you're Colombian. That's it. But America doesn't go that way. America goes by where you were born was important.
Right. And so, just along that same vein, during your childhood or during the rise of Hitler, did you ever feel compelled to conceal your religion to either authority figures that you didn't know were part of the Gestapo, or just to other classmates? Did you ever feel compelled to conceal your religion?
No, because you didn't. You were a Jew.
Right.
And you didn't, there was no way. The Jewish community was every town in Germany had a Jewish community, and it was Jews helping other Jews and so on. There was no, we went to synagogue, and at that point still, and anyway, under Hitler you could not conceal. If you had one drop of Jewish blood, you were out, you were gone. It might be your great-grandfather or somewhere. He did not, and a lot of German Jews fought in World War I with the German army, and they thought they were immune. Didn't matter. Jews were Jews, and whether you were an infant or 90.
Interesting. So just in reference to personal night, what When you saw your uncle's, I believe his shoe shop, you saw his burned down as well as your synagogue. What was kind of running through your mind? Did you understand the political situation? Did you?
No, not that. Well, we knew that something was going on, and because one of our teachers at the boarding school was a Jewish man, young man, and the Gestapo picked him up the day before. We didn't know why, and we were awakened on the morning of the what the next morning, and said we had a chauffeur and pick us up. We're going back to when we came into Chemnitz, we saw things boarded up. But listen, when you're 7 years old or 6 years old, you don't, it's mayhem, and it's very hard to express, and it's very hard to. I could not give you. I remember every detail of it, but you can't put it into words.
So when your dad had decided that you guys would try and move to the United States, but then unfortunately your visas didn't pan out, when you decided to try and move to China and specifically Shanghai, can you just describe kind of the experience of getting those visas and the move?
The United States in 1937, 38, we had family in the United States who we didn't really know, but they were family. And we were all going to go to the United States. Now, you didn't just go to the United States. And United States was an isolationist country at the time, and don't forget, the United States was also in a depression in the 30s. So it's not like people ran to the United States. However, we had our sponsors. You had to have a sponsor. Money, of course, was no object, and the furniture was packed up in huge vans and shipped to the United States. My family, and was in a warehouse in Staten Island, on Staten Island. However, we could not get into the United States because you couldn't get in. Very few people got into the United States. And so, and we were also not German. We happened to have a passport because my parents, in the early 20s, my father escaped from the Russian army. You see, it's a very convoluted sort of history. Because he was born in Lithuania, Lithuania was independent, and the Russians came in, and this is all history. And my uncle had gone to Germany when he was young and established himself in Germany. And so it's a very difficult thing to really basically talk about, because you could not grasp with any of the people there. Nobody made any decisions, but we could not get into the United States. Now, we were supposed to actually not. We also had family in Scotland, and we were supposed to go to Scotland, which we were all going to go to. My uncle and my aunt, and they went to Scotland. My grandmother went to Scotland in June of 1939, and we were supposed to follow in 4 weeks, and then September the war started, September of 90. So we were now stuck. However, we had a passport, and when you had a passport in Germany, you were not German, you were Czechoslovakian. They bought that passport in the 20s. People bought things. Passport was very important, and that's what saved our lives, because the Germans, Czechoslovakia was not, now. Then came the situation of perhaps going to Shanghai. Now, we had to have a permit to go to Shanghai, but my uncle in the United States, in California, bought the permit. We had the permit to go to Shanghai. Now, you have to remember, This is 1940. The war is on. The Germans have invaded Czechoslovakia and all of Europe. And but we had this passport. Now, it was a Czechoslovakian passport. And a few months before the Germans went into Czechoslovakia, my sister, who was 5 years older than I, had to have her own passport. I was still on my parents' passport. And he went to the Czechoslovakian consulate, and the Czechoslovakian consul said to him, you know, the Germans are going to come in there any minute. And that would have been the end. But what he did was he crossed out, he gave my sister a Slovakian passport, which was an independent country, and and crossed out the Czech, and it left, we now were Slovakian. We were no longer Czechoslovakian. Germans invaded a few weeks later, or whatever it was. Czechoslovakia was gone. The Gestapo called my father, because here now they had him. They were trying to get him in the worst way. And not that these guys didn't buy shoes from us, because they all did. But nevertheless, because, you know, and now they couldn't get him again, because he had a Slovakian passport, and so he was, quote, an alien. However, what they did say was, you have to be out of Germany in 6 months. In other words, they deported him. And this was like in August or something. And I found a piece of paper when my mom passed away that my father had asked we still had problems. We had the permit to go to Shanghai. We had the visa to go through Japan, but we did not have the papers to go through Russia. We had to go by train. And so we had all the papers except for the Soviet Union, except for Russia. So we left my hometown and went to Berlin, and there was the criteria of, there was the 5 minutes that life was either going to go this way or it was going to go that way. If it went that way, I would not be sitting here today. And my father went up to the Russian embassy to see if we can get these papers. Now, he spoke Russian because he originally was. And I remember standing, see, that's a memory, there's certain memories. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs with my sister and my mom, and my mother saying, if Papa comes out smiling, then I don't think she said okay, because we didn't speak English, and this is now 1 o'clock or noon or something. And he came out and he was smiling. 5 o'clock we were on the train to start the journey to China. So we went from Berlin to Warsaw, that's where the Gestapo came on board. Now, we found out later that there were some Jews on the train that were also going to China, but they were taken off. We were not. Passport. We went over the border to the Soviet Union. Safe. And then we come to Moscow and we became tourists. We were taken to Lenin's tomb. We were in a very nice hotel. And then we went on the Siberian Express, which was going from Moscow through Siberia, which is like 9 days, to Harbin, which was China. But everywhere we went, this was a fascinating thing about Europe and what happened in the world. And where we got off the train in Manchuria, and there were Jews welcoming us, Russian Jews who had been there since the revolution.
Right. I'm also just curious, where do you consider home? Is it Germany because you were born there, or is it diminished by the oppression you were forced to face? Or is it China because you sought refuge there and that's where you experienced the majority of your adolescence?
I was always stateless. So that's why when I became an American, when I was 23, and I walked out of the courthouse, in those days you were sworn in individually. And you were tested, you know. That's why I have to laugh, because the first question, he asked me if there was a war between the United States and Israel. And it was obvious that I was Jewish, because in those days, on every application, you had to put your religion, you know, which you don't have to do today anymore. Who would I fight for? But when I walked out of that courthouse, it was the biggest thing. To me, to come out of that courthouse and be able to say, in New York, and to be able to say, I am an American, and nobody can touch me from now on. Jew or no Jew, I am an